Cooper too if we have time. But this came across the wire, and this isn't to try to dunk on PFF. This isn't trying to disprove him. I immediately thought, is he underrated? I'm going to ask you before we dive into the information this question that PFF posed. The most underrated player for every NFC North team. Not really a question, but a comment. He says, Gervin Dexter Sr., the defensive lineman for the Chicago Bears, is underrated. Amick Robertson, cornerback from the Lions, underrated. Blake Cashman, linebacker from the Vikings, which, man, I agree. Blake Cashman's a dog. I really wanted to on him last year. And then Romeo Doubs from the Green Bay Packers. So if you could pick one underrated player on the Packers, and I'm not going to ask you to do that, Jacob. That seems to be the question they asked. They picked Romeo Doubs as the most underrated player on the Packers roster. Do you consider Romeo Doubs underrated, yes or no?
Yes, just because I think every wide receiver on the Packers is underrated, and we probably won't get to it today, but maybe tomorrow I'll show you where that is kind of read out in the fantasy world, the fantasy football world. But I think that, and one, if I did have to answer, I'd say I think Tucker Kraft is by far the most underrated Packer for sure on offense. I really do. But I do think it's fair to say that Romeo Doubs is underrated in the fact of some of the key catches I think he makes in key situations. He's missed a significant amount of time. I think one of the misconceptions is people think that Watson's made of glass. Romeo Doubs has missed, I think, more games than Watson has up until, the very end of last year, obviously, when Watson had his injury. But I do think that he's maybe a little bit underrated just because the media doesn't, he's not a great interview. He's not a great charismatic guy. He's not a post-game show dude. He's a guy that's going to come in, put his head down, and he just catches the ball, and that's all. And I think that he doesn't have the flashy stats. He's not a 4.2 guy, and he doesn't have crazy size or length or anything like that. So in that aspect, I think he is a little bit underrated. I would say not drastically underrated, but I think it's fair to say that he is underrated. Does that make sense?
Roger Rance in the chat said our offense is loaded. I think they're way better than some people were giving them credit for. That's for sure. AFAM says Doubs was on fire for that Dallas playoff game. That's the thing for me, Jacob. Is like there's times where you look up and go, Dobby's that dude. Yeah. And then there's other times I go, where's Dobby? You know what I mean? So I don't know if I'm as sold as some people, but I think he makes a great point there. Let's dive into the information here. Let's get to the bottom of it. All right. I said, is Romeo Doubs underrated? Former Green Bay Packer Robert Brooks recently said, he was on the Wildy and Tao show, he felt like Romeo Doubs is a receiver in Green Bay that has the skill set to become a true number one from last year's roster. Of course, this was before Matthew Golden was drafted. It was after Matthew Golden was drafted, but we haven't even seen Matthew Golden yet, right? So he may be that guy too. And PFF seems to agree, at least on the surface. Let's take a look. All right, so Doubs actually finished fourth on the team in receiving yards last year with 601. The targets were evenly distributed amongst four players. Wicks had 76, Reed 75, Doubs 72. So you can't say, well, it was lack of targets, right? Yeah. So when you look at that, and he finished fourth on the team in receiving yards, and again, third amongst wide receivers, okay? It was Jaden Reed at 857, Tucker Kraft at 707. Obviously, he's a tight end. Christian Watson at 620, then Romeo Doubs at 601.
I will say, though, look at the games played. That's a big asterisk that I think has to be noted.
Right, but again, it's about targets, though, Jacob.
Right.
To me, I think that's a big misconception. I think people see the games played and they think, well, he hasn't played as many games, but he had just as many targets.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's positive. I'm saying if he would have played 17, I find it hard to believe that he would not be our number one wide receiver.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Next, Doubs finished the season with the third most catches on the team at 46. Reed led the way at 55. Tucker Kraft finished second with 50. Wicks finished with only 39 receptions while leading the team in targets. So the big thing that you're finding in this article is maybe Wicks is overrated as opposed to Doubs being underrated. Yeah. Nonetheless, the fact that Doubs finished second amongst wide receivers with those with the however many he had, what did he finish with? 46 receptions. You're not seeing any of these that would suggest he's the number one receiver. You see what I'm saying? That's kind of the point I was uncovering here. Doubs finished the season fourth on the team in receiving touchdowns with only 4. Tucker Kraft led the way with 7. Reed had 6. Wicks had 5. So you're yet to see a statistic that says Romeo Doubs is the top guy. And that's where I'm like, how can he be underrated if he's not even the top receiver on the team? You know?
Could I make a pushback on it?
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to if you look at those projections, if he were to have 4 more games, I think he surpasses almost every single one of these players in those metrics.
Right, but if you do that, you're upping his targets.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, totally.
So here's when you look at the projections, if he played more games, he'd have got more targets. But if every player on the team got an even amount of targets, he wouldn't have finished first in any of these statistics. You see what I'm saying? So that number would be overinflated because he got extra targets. That's how I'm looking at it. You understand what I'm saying? Like, of course, a player is going to have more stats if he's got significantly more targets. Because let's say he played in the same 17 games. That would have been 4 more games. And I don't know what the percentage would be. He would have been well over 80 targets, probably over 90 targets, which would have been damn near 20 more targets than anybody else on the team. So, of course, the numbers would be higher. That's why I feel like the most important statistic, in my opinion, you may disagree, and that's totally cool. I think the most important statistic is your EPA per target, which we'll get to here in a second. That shows your true production, like how good were you when you were targeted on the field. And really, routes ran give an even deeper look at that, because sometimes you're not being targeted, but maybe you should. Although, if you trust your quarterback to get the ball to the open receiver, you'd think that they would, right? Doubs also finished 4th on the team in yards per reception. So this is what I like about yards per reception. Remove everything else. This is strictly when they get the ball on their hands. Here's how many yards they get. Christian Watson led the way, 21.4 yards per reception. Jaden Reed was second at 15.6. Tucker Kraft, 14.1. Then Romeo Doubs at 13.1. So he's 3rd on the team amongst wide receivers in yards per reception. So not even in the top 2, right? Moving along, he finished 11th in catch rate at 63.9%. This really caught me off guard. Now, there's running backs, there's tight ends in here, and we'll try to get to the bottom of just receivers in the text here. But his catch rate was 63.9%. Remember when Matt LaFleur said he loved running back Chris Brooks when they signed him because of his catching ability and ability to block? The running back, they got from Miami off the scrap heap. We all kind of rolled our eyes going, of course, you love everybody you sign, right? Dude, his catch rate out of the backfield was 84.6%. That was better than Josh Jacobs at 83.7%. Now, if we just focus on wide receivers, which is what this article is about here, just focusing on wide receivers, Malik Heath led the way at 76.9% catch rate. Jaden Reed was second at 73.3%. Then Romeo Doubs was 10% lower than Jaden Reed, who some of Twitter, Packers Twitter, seems to think Jaden Reed has a drop issue. Romeo Doubs' catch rate was only 63.9%. Watson's was 54.7%. Wicks's was 51.3%, and Melton's was 47.1%. But I will say this about Watson. I think I cover it here in a minute in the article. Watson is running deep routes, so the catch rate is going to be much lower. That's just, with Doubs, he's playing boundary X. You don't see them take many deep shots. At least you didn't last year, deep shots of Romeo Doubs. So it's a lot of underneath stuff, digs, hitches, curls, things like that. Next is catch rate over expected. So this is like based off of the specific situation. How often do they catch the ball more than they should in that specific given situation, right? And there's a lot of factors that come into that. We don't have time to dive into it all. Malik Heath Shine leading the way at 9.7% catch rate over expected. Next was Christian Watson at 5.2%, right? Making it clear that Watson had the most difficult catches, explaining his lower catch percentage being the deep threat. Next would be Romeo Doubs at plus 2.9%, Reed at plus 1.2%, Melton negative 6.9%, bro.
Wow.
I hate to say it, but Bo Melton is trending way in the opposite direction. And Wicks minus 12.4%. So he has got to fix that. He's got to get back to that rookie form where I felt like he played really, really good football. So again, when you look at the catch rate over expected, a more advanced metric saying, okay, given the situation, Doubs ended up finishing 3rd on the team in that metric at 2.9%.
Bro, you know what I'm seeing from this exercise here?
What's up?
Malik Heath may be the most underrated person on our whole roster. And what sucks is as I'm sitting here watching Malik Heath, he's got the size, he's got the weight, He can run decent. He can block out of the freaking
block,
park.
yes.
The guy has the great attitude. He's got the hands. What does he not have? He wasn't drafted.
Right. And
Every
it was
single person in
because,
front of him. Yeah.
yeah, I believe the reason his draft stock dropped too, Jacob, if I remember correctly, and again, this is allegedly, and I don't think I'm getting him mixed up. You guys go fact check.
Character thing.
I think there was a DUI or something in college. I could be wrong, but I do remember Matt LaFleur, when they brung Malik Heath in as an undrafted free agent into camp, he said, "I'm going to ride his ass." And they said that he was every day he was screaming on the practice field at Malik Heath, like that tough love, like, look, this is your opportunity, dude. Don't squander it. So he had physical traits. He had tools and ability in college. He just ran into a little bump in the road, which we've all done stupid stuff, right? And he's kept his nose completely clean since coming to Green Bay, and he's done nothing but, in my opinion, perform well. I feel like he's done what was asked of him. Think back to the Giants game. Was it in 2022? I think it was. It was either 22 or 23. It might have been 23, where he caught what should have been the game winner if we hadn't come out and played press man coverage on the following drive and Nixon get cooked out the slot.
That's right.
So, again, not to bring that up, but so again, the article's supposed to be about Doubs, but like you point out, you're going to catch little things like, okay, this player's probably the true underrated, and Wicks maybe a little overrated, right? Next, Jaden Reed led the way in receiving EPA. I love receiving EPA. Expected points added, okay? With a plus 37.7, not percent, but a plus 37.7 is what it's supposed to be. I don't know why I put percent in there. That shouldn't have been added in because that's just EPA, total EPA. So disregard the percent there. So Jaden Reed led the way there. Doubs finished second at 24.9%. Watson third at a plus 16. Heath third with plus 7.4. Melton minus 6.9. And then Wicks minus 12.9 there. So when it comes to receiving EPA, Jaden Reed at the top, but once again, Doubs second. He still hasn't led in any statistical category yet. Next, in yak over expected, Doubs finished third amongst receivers, right?
Look
at a plus 13.
Sorry.
Reed led the way at 59. Wicks plus 44. So we finally find something we go, wow, Wicks is really good at it. We know he can separate. We know he can run good routes, but he's really good with yards after the catch as well. It's just the hands. The hands are the big issue, What were you laughing about, Jacob? You see something there?
No, just Tucker Kraft is unreal.
Oh, yeah. And I started to try to remove the tight ends because Tucker Kraft's at the top of everything. We were trying to focus on receivers. But, yeah, his yak is plus 159, yak over expected. It's just crazy. Yeah, it's nuts. There was somebody else in there, too, Chris Brooks. You see Chris Brooks at a plus 14. Josh Jacobs was the other one. That was at plus 127 catching the ball in the backfield. So, and that's you could look at that two ways. You could look at it and go, well, Jordan Love's numbers are inflated because he's checking it down to the running backs. I think that's a fair argument to a certain extent. But also the big knock for me with Jordan Love has been you need to check the ball down more.
That's the thing is he was not – I would agree that he barely even used the check down compared to most quarterbacks. So right. Imagine if Jacobs – and honestly, I think Jacobs coming out of the backfield would be a bruiser. Like, you know what I mean? You give him just a little bit of a head of steam and like a 5-yard kind of, alleyway to run through. It's like, go ahead, cornerback. Go ahead, safety.
Right. All right, next. In average separation, okay, I believe this is broken down by yards. The higher number is better, obviously. Jaden Reed actually led the way with 4 yards of separation on average per route, okay? Wicks had 3, so there you're seeing Wicks kind of shine in that regard. Heath, 2.7. That surprised me. Now, some of that is guys getting schemed open. Nonetheless, you can't blame them for being open. That's a positive thing. If someone's consistently open because of separation, sooner or later you got to acknowledge, okay, maybe they're good at route running, right? Doubs was a 2.6, Watson 2.4, and Melton 2.3. So there you're seeing Doubs finish third in separation. And again, our boy Reed leading the way with Wicks being second. One of my favorite metrics is EPA per target for receivers. Okay, so here is EPA per target. And Jacob, here comes your boy Malik Heath. Malik Heath leads the way at EPA per target at plus 0.57. Next is Jaden Reed at a plus 0.50. then Doubs at a plus 0.35, Watson plus 0.30, Milton minus 0.14, and then Wicks at a minus 0.17. So what you see here is Malik Heath once again leading a category, and Doubs still has yet to lead any of these categories along the way. So that's the numbers that I pulled, a little bit of advanced metrics, some of just the normal statistics. Me personally, I said in conclusion, I personally don't believe Romeo Doubs is underrated. In my eyes, his ceiling is a great number two. At his best, he can be a great number two receiver, right? But his floor is being a very low number three, in my opinion. Third best on the roster. With a reoccurring concussion problem, along with a suspension from being unhappy with his role in the offense. However, it is worth mentioning that Doubs plays X on the boundary side of the field most of the time. That does limit the space that other guys have to work in Matt LaFleur's offense. So if you're mostly lining up on the boundary, the short side of the field, the separation naturally should be lower. And also your success rate's probably going to go down unless you're a dominant boundary X. I don't think he's a dominant boundary X. Wicks can create separation to be a dominant boundary X, but he doesn't have the hands, at least up to this point. However, when he's in the slot, his yak ability makes him extremely valuable there. So Wicks is kind of coming out as the tweener, Jacob. Like, he's not good enough to catch the ball in a phone booth to play X, but he's got the separation. However, his yak ability would make you think he's probably a better F or a better slot, a moving Z, as opposed to the alter. So, when it comes to Doubs, my personal opinion is he is not underrated. I think he's rated right about where he needs to be, which is, hey, look, this dude has the ability to be an upper end number two with the floor of a low three. Now, with that being said, I didn't play in the NFL like Robert Brooks. So please don't think this is me saying I know more than Robert Brooks. That's the farthest thing from the truth. That's just running through the metrics and some of the advanced metrics. I kind of feel like Dobby is not that dude. Right, and you may disagree, Jacob. That's totally cool. I just wanted to – that was my case. That was the information that I uncovered. I want to hear your parting thoughts on that specific topic.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's it was a great exercise because like I said at the beginning, I did think that he was underrated, not necessarily in the NFL, but in the Packers wide receiver room. But now, to be honest with you, I am taking a step back where I would consider that, more. I like you said, ceiling would be a strong two. I think his floor is even more lower than what you said.
Could be, yeah.
I think that guys now, when you add in a Golden and even a Savion Williams to do more, to take away more from what Doubs does well, which again we saw was not honestly a lot. He's not the top of most of those metrics, and obviously we're not going to have Watson for a while there. I think the nice thing about doing an exercise like this is you start to realize the opportunities that other guys have, because if Doubs isn't that underrated number one, it means that somebody else is. And that's going to definitely, to me, I think that Dontavian Wicks has this is his make it or break it year. If anybody on this offense has a make it or break it type season, I think it's Wicks, because he could go so far on either side of the spectrum. You know what I mean? We've seen so much positive from him with his route running skills, his separation, at times his hands, but then we've seen the absolute opposite of that with him being just booty cheeks. Bo Melton, I hate to say it, but I think that ship,
man, it sucks.
It sucks. I think that ship has kind of sailed, to be honest. Watson is still a big glaring question mark. I think that right now, Jaden Reed is by far the most trust I have in a wide receiver on this squad. Followed secondly by probably Malik Heath, which is crazy to say because the guy he can't get on the field again because he's a UDFA, and when you have so much draft capital and time and scouting put into these players, they almost do unfortunately get that nod no matter what. So I don't know, man. I highlighted a chat just a little bit ago from Go Pack Go All Day asking, do you think that one of the wide receivers might get traded? If it were to be one of them, I'm sorry, it's got to be Doubs. He's got the name. He's got the name. People, if they're willing to say that he's one of the most underrated players and that floats with the NFL media, that means that one of 32 NFL teams may take a chance on him. And I don't know, do you think we could get a fifth or a sixth back for him or something like that?
Probably conditional. It might be
Right.
something that, hey, look, if if he goes out and he plays this many games or he has this many catches or something like that, this many snaps, then you get a sixth or a seventh or maybe a fifth. But if he doesn't reach that, then you get nothing in return. Now here's the thing. This is in no way, shape, or form a prediction that Doubs is going to get traded. Please don't misunderstand us. We're not saying that. But if you made me choose one of these receivers, that there's two things that have got to line up. Would the Packers be willing to part ways with them? And would another team be willing to give up a draft pick for him? Doubs is the only one that fits both of those criteria.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense.
If
Now,
I had to guess a team, Pittsburgh is starting to just look more and more.
It does. Yeah. It does.
Because other than what they got with DK, they got Calvin Austin and basically Roman Wilson, a guy that has not really seen the field. To me, I mean, it seems just a glaring part, but who knows?
Yeah. And that was something that was being rumored, floated around here recently, that they had already had talks about that trade. And I know people want to shoot it down like, okay, that never happened, just like the DK Metcalf rumors never happened. Guys, it's been confirmed pretty much from a couple of different people, if I remember correctly. It came from Dobbs's camp that Dobbs was a part of a trade negotiation for DK Metcalf. So that there have been conversations now, it sounds like, with two different teams of Romeo Doubs potentially.
Well, and wasn't it a known fact that we were shopping him throughout the draft too?
That's what I'm saying. That was for DK. Yeah.
Right.
So and again, that got leaked out from Dobbs's camp. That didn't just come from some rando that said, hey, this happened. They specifically said, I think it was Justice Moscato, I believe is his name. I haven't interacted with him at all on X, and I'm just gonna say he knows what he's talking about, because I ain't gonna try to discredit anybody I don't know anything about. But he's the one who said, guys, that came from Romeo Doubs's camp, that he was being shopped. So number one Packer fan says, I don't understand why you would want to trade Doubs. I think that's a big mistake. I can understand you feeling that way. Before I did this exercise, I was on board with number one Packer fan, like kind of feeling like, I don't think we need to get rid of Doubs. But after doing that exercise this morning, I'm like, and that's why I do it. It's not to go, hey guys, look how smart I am. It's like, I need to understand this. Like, what am I missing here? I think he's valuable, but he's not indispensable. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I came away with there in that deep dive. And I'll say this, there's nothing wrong with waiting until you get into the season a little bit and let Matthew Golden get his feet under him. Let Savion Williams get his feet under him and kind of see how the receiver, maybe you feel a little more comfortable with parting ways from Doubs at that point, as opposed to just doing it in training camp. And then you get in training camp and go, crap, we swung and missed on both these receivers. Now you're in trouble, right? Now, even though Dobbs's numbers, were kind of down in every metric that we just highlighted in that article, he's still probably going to be better than a receiver that, if I don't want to say no, but you're going, guys, it's going to be a year or two for these two guys already. I'm not saying that's the case with Golden and Savion. I hope they come out gangbusters and they're number one and number two, because that means you don't have to pay Christian. You don't have to pay Dobby. You can focus on Jaden Reed being your slot and paying him next year. But other than that, you ain't got to worry about it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the best case scenario for me. I think I understand where you're coming from, number one Packer fan. I do. Because you go back to 2023, some of the catches that Dobbs made was like, holy cow. But again, the numbers are the numbers. You
had the time, you had the concussions. That to me is the biggest worry, I think. And the fact that we did that similar exercise, I don't know, what was it, 3-4 days ago, when we looked at the progression of the rosters starting in the 90s. And we saw one similar trait, that a lot of those guys at the bottom of the rosters that were wide receivers, specifically wide receivers and tight ends and running backs, they kept them around. And then all of a sudden one year they went from the bottom of the roster right to the top. And that's, to me, that just screams that we're protecting our salary cap, and we're not going to just give guys. The Packers are not teams that are just going to give guys $20 million contracts just to keep them on the team. They do a farm. They want to replace them. It sucks. It's a business. You got 3 to 5 years. If you're real good, we'll give you another contract. If not, we got a whole crop of newbies coming up.
Got it. Number one Packer fan says, Justice is legit, by the way. Good stuff. Hey, drop his Twitter handle if you don't care. Number one Packer fan in the chat if you have it. That way everybody can go give him a follow. Obviously, he's the one who reported on that came out of Romeo Doubs's camp for him being a part of a trade negotiation for DK Metcalf. So I want to make sure he gets full credit for that. It's not something that we we uncovered. I think it was Steve Hook. I got so many people I interact with on Twitter. I think it was Steve on Twitter had posted it before, and I said, "Hey man, where'd you have that information again?" And then he retagged it, and it was Justice Moscato, if I'm saying that name correctly, was the one who reported it. So Malik Heath, last thing before we move on here, Jacob. I was going, okay, Malik Heath, those numbers kind of stood out. Now, when you look at PFF, you go, Clayton, 2024 grade was a 62.9. Okay, that's why we always say PFF isn't everything, right? Where does he line up? Because that's going to determine, does he have a role in this offense? He lined up wide 160 snaps, 23 in the slot, okay? So he is a wide receiver. When you've seen him in the separation numbers and you've seen him in the, all of the stuff, the EPA numbers were in the positives, right? Was it EPA per target, if I remember correctly? Let me scroll back up real quick. I don't want to misquote it. Yeah, EPA per target. Where's the separation? Malik Heath in separation, a little bit lower, right? Yeah, so he was at a 2.7. Not horrible, but obviously not toward the top. Still better than Doubs. Mm-hmm. If he's going to line up out wide, Malik Heath kind of feels like someone who could play boundary X. That might be the dude competing with Romeo Doubs for boundary X. If you're just 100% assuming Matthew Golden is going to play Z and Jaden Reed's going to play slot, and we all know that moving Z in the F/slot position in Matt LaFleur's offense is very interchangeable. So you're starting to kind of put the pieces together as you get closer to camp. And again, we got another mini camp coming up here on the 27th or the 28th next week. So we'll have everybody back in house. I think they will have helmets on for that. Maybe they won't. I know mandatory mini camp coming up in June, they'll definitely have shells on. So we will see. There it is right there. Everybody go give him a follow at JUMOSQ. Appreciate you running that down for us there, number one Packer fan. Show him some love on Twitter. Tell him that PTA was talking about him, and appreciate his reporting on that with the Romeo Doubs situation. All right, so that's pretty much it for the wide receiver conversation. Again, just want to point out there at the end that Malik Heath, he does line up out wide more than in the slot. And to me, that feels like he's not blazing speed, so you wouldn't want him necessarily at the Z. Some people were convinced that the X needs to be a blazer. I don't personally agree with that. I think they need to be able to play within a phone booth because typically the coverage is going to roll to the field side most of the time because you're going to have a couple speed demons on that side of the field. So it is what it is there. All right. Next, Jacob, is a little Edgerrin Cooper talk. We only got 10 minutes. I wonder if we got time to get into it here. That'd be great if we could. I wanted to talk a little Edgerrin Cooper because there was a list that came